to portraiture, which are similar in many ways to other things we shoot, except there are some basic elements you really want to pay attention to. For one, the first one is when you are photographing someone, the eyes should be your point of focus. That's the most important part of a portrait, the eyes. And so that should be very sharp. Then you think about depth of field. How much depth should I have based on photographing a person? Well, I found that f8, really f11 is probably better to give you the full detail in, so that the nose is sharp and the ears are sharp, everything's sharp. So you're the width of a head, depth of field, f8 or f11. That's what I found to be the best. And hands, so many times someone has their hands, and the worst way you can photograph a hand, I'll put my hand up this way if you can see my hand, is flat back of the hand. That is not attractive. You want to turn the hand, maybe have the fingers up and over. So you'll see that as I show some examples. The back of the hand is just too flat and draws the eye to it. Backgrounds, they should be relatively simple. Like, you can fade them if you want. You'll see some examples of that. As in any other type of photography we do, spatial relationships, and what I mean by that is composition. How is the main person fitting into the scene? And it really depends on whether you're doing casual kinds of photography or more formal, as I'll point out. And strong compositions. I think where you place the person and place the person in relation to what's in the background, be very careful. So when you're doing portraitures in someone's house or in yours and you're setting it up, then you know what the background should be. But even if you're outside and you have someone that you say, stand over here, always, as I've said in other things, stop looking at the main subject and look at the background and see how the two fit together. But it's especially important in portraitures. And emotion. The person's face, does it express an emotion? And certainly that's another aspect of the eyes. What emotion are they emitting? Are they happy? Are they sad? Or whatever it is. And hopefully it's an emotion of happiness. And lighting. Boy, lighting is so critical. You really don't want hard light. You want soft light so that features on the face aren't just blown out white areas and so on. Lighting is critical. And in a studio, I was taught to set up a background 6 feet behind the main subject and put a softer light on this background. And then I would have a main light, which was above the subject, pointing downward, soft light coming up close. The interesting thing about large lights in a studio, the closer you make it, the softer the light, not the harder. The farther back from the subject, the light is harder. You don't want hard light on the face. And then you might have a fill light from the side. And all of those, you want to be careful how you're doing them. You'll see as I talk about the images here, we look at some of them.
Say, John, this is Mike. I found this great website for depth of field where you can move the person around and put in your lens and your camera.
Yes.
I put the website up in the chat if anyone is interested in it.
Oh, well, that's great. That's great. Thank you. So casual, if we look at this one, by the way, these are not my images. I've pulled these down from the web, but they're good examples. Here's that's certainly a portrait in a way, not thinking portrait only the head or the face. This is mother and daughter, yet it's taking up not very much of the image itself, and the background is very bright. So let's compare this to something more creative and certainly striking, something like this, where you're thinking, if you're photographing outside, later in the day or early morning, you see the leading lines of the road coming up and the silhouette and the sky. And in fact, on this one, I would even consider cropping from the top to make this more of a long rectangular and emphasize the mother and the children. So in a way, this is a portrait of a family. But look at the difference of that to this one. And you could do a number of things with this. I don't want to take the time to do that right now, but you could make a selection, do a selection of the figures, the subject, and then change the background. I'm going to do some of that with some of the other photos, but I just want, this is very creative. Well, let's compare this. I found this one yesterday. I thought, oh, it's a wedding. And the detail, and remember, I pulled them down from the website, so they may not have everything we want to see in them, but didn't have detail all throughout. But the overall blue cast, I think, is not appealing. And as I've talked about in other images, composition, there is just too much empty space on this right-hand side that you don't need. Your eye tends to go in there and you're not seeing the essence of the image, which is the couple. And having this in this sort of blue format doesn't look right to me at all. If I do a levels adjustment on this and just change the midtones, it really brings that sky out, darkens here, allows some light on the dress, much more interesting than the way it was presented initially. I'll come back to that. From there to just some simple changes that makes this very different. Now, there is an aspect that I always talk about. Where's the brightest area and is it an important area? This bright area around the head is certainly creating that as a three-dimensional, but it's way too bright. That should be brought down in detail. So think about those when you are photographing someone outside. What is behind them? Stop looking at them and look at everything around to see how everything fits together. Look at just the difference of how this was presented initially. And now by cropping, I'm presenting that couple to you. Portraiture really must have an instant recognition of what you're putting across. This is not landscape photography or things of that nature. So let's think about just casual. Here's a interesting look, detail, sharp eyes, detail on the hair, and then a little blur going back, which is really, very nice. Now these are casual, so not presenting formal photography here, but the upper left bright area, this little right area in the background, very distracting. And if we, again, crop just a little bit to improve the overall image of what's being presented, I think the colors in the background are very special. They work well with the colors of her jeans and her black shirt. So now we bring this down and you see the flow of the line of the arm leading up to the face, and even the one on the right leading up to the face, not necessarily away, but to the face, and just a little bit of darkening on the foreground. I think the blur is very good. Great depth of field for the subject and the foreground, and just darkening the bottom part just a little bit would bring the eye up even more to her, and in the background a little bit more. So what is the brightest area? And when I was talking about hard light, you see the blowout on her forehead, on her cheeks. So this is a casual shot. You need to be careful. Even casual shots outside go to open shade. Open shade is very, very soft light. So recommend doing that if you're doing these kinds of casual photography. going to open a series of these because I played with them, but they were so neat to just have them around and show the different aspects of it. Casual photography, softer light, even though she looks bright, softer light. There's detail throughout. And I talked about expression, emotion. The eyes are sharp, the hair is sharp going off, and then starts to fall off and focus. That's fine. Very good. When you're doing casual photography, also think about what the subject is wearing. The bright area of her blouse is just a little too bright, but more importantly is this bright area in the back. Now, you'll all hopefully forgive me, but it's better to have flipped this image this way so that you are looking into the eyes rather than the original of that looking out. But both work, but I prefer this one, looking into the face of the subject, especially with formal photography, studio photography. Now, the other thing that was taught to me a lot was the amount of space behind or to the right of the subject and that in front of the subject. You should have a little less spacing from the right-hand side than you do from the left-hand side. So I'll crop this just a little bit more this way so you get an idea of what I'm talking about related to spacing. And the reason is that as you come in from the left, actually that's a little bit too, taking off a little too much. When you're coming in from the left and looking into the face, you want some space there to allow the eye to roam around the image and come back to the face. And then you want a little bit of space behind the person and to the right, but not as much. You don't want the viewer's eye staying over on the right-hand side. You want it staying on the face. And you see how that cropping does such a difference, especially the spacing in front of the face. Now that face is prominent. And now the background up in the upper corner is just too bright, golden. And I thought, okay, what can be done to these kinds of images to make them more artistic? So one is to, of course, darken that. So as I have this image cropped the way I thought it should be cropped, just do a levels and darkening, and then darken the corners just a little bit. And so also it would continue to darken up in this area here to take that out. Actually, I don't think that's very attractive at all. And in this case, the better thing to do would be to make a selection of the figure and then remove that. I'd clone from the left-hand side over. So this is in the situations where you aren't controlling what's going on, but you are in the sense of look at where she, now I know with little kids running around, it's a little tougher to do this, but stop looking at what you're shooting and look at the background and see what you can do. But look at the three-dimensionality. And that's the aspect of portraiture that I think is very important, is how she now stands out so much more from the background. Here's an example of cute gal. What a cute little gal. But boy, that background, and I see what the photographer was going after, which is this sun ray back here and some of the ray coming in. But again, that doesn't have the figure standing out well. The eye comes up to the top. And as I've done many times in the past, if you want to see where your eye goes, just rotate it, especially upside down, but even rotating it to this way. I see I didn't crop this. Now let's rotate this. And you can see you already, yeah, I just concentrates on that upper right area because your eye will always go to the brightest area of the image. You're no longer looking at this beautiful little gal. So not the way you want to do it. Keep that in mind, but you see the depth of field, sharpness from the tail of what she's holding all the way back to her head starts to fall off. That works really well, but keep in mind highlights, shadows, what subject, and how she was standing was cute, but could be much more interesting looking at positioning. I have another one that so we're working up from casual to more formal and so on. I want to take you to this one, give you that idea. Here's the image and you think, yeah, okay, but there's a little bit of blowout on the face because it's a casual shot and the light wasn't soft light, it was harder light. Then you have the image that you can darken some of that area and ease some detail in there, maybe. So you want to look at your histogram. Then I lightened the face just a little bit of the gal. So you want to bring the eye to where that most important part is. So if I brought back some of the detail and then just lightened it a little bit, so I have soft skin throughout, and you see mom's face now, you compare the two, how much harder light that is. So a little softer light. Soft light is so important in portraiture. And then when you have soft light, you can lighten the areas within the image that you want. See now, the lightest area is the little girl's face, and mom's face is lit up also. So very important of where are you controlling the light, especially on faces. On faces. You already are starting to see did with this. Here's the shot. Very interesting composition. Good depth of field. Sharpness here, sharpness on the face. Is there some detail in there? Well, yes, there is. And a bright background, which is interesting. But I thought this is a really neat pose. And here's where I am accepting more space on the left than on the right, because it's not just the face, it's not just the head. When you're dealing with just the face and the head, you want to be sure about that balance of left side space and right side space. In this case, that adds to the intrigue of the image. So I thought, let's just add a sky. One thing about what Photoshop has done, and some others now, Luminaire and so on, is just put a sky in. Look at the three-dimensionality now from that image to this one. And I thought a little bit more darkening of the sky and the foreground. Well, let's compare these. You see the foreground on this one is so bright. Your eye will come down here. Concentrate on the subject. Portraiture is about the subject. So darken the foreground, darken the sky a little bit. One of my techniques is always think of a little bit darker portion on the upper area and on the foreground, because that pushes the eye into the center of the image. What a difference of how this is being presented. Two different ways, one with the sky and one without. Even with the sky, you see the difference of the three-dimensionality of the darker area here, the darker foreground. So often I see landscapes that I think are just flat. They're beautiful landscapes, but they're flat because of the contrast aspects and darkening that foreground a little bit. So a little bit more formal now. We go to this image. Like, what a beautiful shot. You see the light coming from the side, coming from a lower area. Now, when you are thinking about light, and if you have a light setup, you want to place it. If you place it down low, in a sense, coming up from the right-hand side. Then you're illuminating that portion of the face. So just be aware where it's coming from and what you're doing. And this one, I don't think it was a setup. I think it was just a normal light that's coming in from the right. But there's detail all throughout. There's sharpness in her eyes, sharpness on the hat, her dress, and the background is out of focus, which is very good. Now I think of this image a lot as I was looking at it the other day, and I thought, what an interesting image. And I want the viewer to go exactly to where I want the eye to be. I don't need all the dress down the bottom. The essence of this to me is her expression. Those eyes, they're so beautiful. So let's crop in a little bit more, just a little bit on the bottom so that her arms are in there. And now we have that aspect of the image. And that's a portrait. That is how you want, versus here's the entire thing. Now, they weren't maybe producing this as a portrait. I saw it that way, just in the sense of presenting what I would want the person to see. Now, the white feathers in the top are a little bit too bright, and I would want to darken those some, and certainly this area, the area in the back here, so that there is no distraction from this, and even darken down a little bit around here so that the light comes in and you go right to her. Let's look at the difference of just some simple techniques of darkening, not doing sophisticated aspects. Once you have a shot that really has all the detail, just simple dodge, burn some aspects, move some of these brighter areas in the background just a little bit, because she is the subject instantly, and even darkening the left side a little bit more. So let's look at, here it is. Let's go to the open. And now let's go to the final presentation. Much difference. You can't stop looking at her face. That's the essence of a portrait. Now, in a studio, you can get very creative. I don't expect many photographers to go to this level, but I thought, what a very creative studio presentation. And if you look at the background right here, right by her waist area, that shows me that this was studio in the sense that that was a background that was folded and went all the way up, so there is no hard crease or a floor, which I think works well in this image. And you see the brightest area is on her face. What a wonderful setup with the book and cat. This is the essence of a portrait, studio portrait. Darken this corner just a little bit to even out. Down at the bottom, some of this. And when I first looked at this, I thought, oh, the light. Well, the light is coming in that way. So I think this is a little too bright on her face, but that really works so well all through. Now you get to be, oh yeah, I want to create a story. Sharpness was very important here, depth of field, the lighting. Very creative. Outside, the pose. She posed, slight bend in the body, very nice. Cutting off the hands, maybe not a good idea, but when you're shooting things like this, include more, crop later. This is a very interesting image overall. The thing I wanted to do with this is to create a different aspect of the background. So if I think about this and look at selecting the subject, so I have the subject, I want to adjust the background. Very easy to do, select inverse. Now we can apply number of changes to the background. One might be, rather than making it darker, let's think about making it lighter. So move the background to lighter and allow a little bit of that green to be there. But what a difference, and just a small change that makes this image look so different from here to here. And now your eyes concentrate on this. Bring the dancing ants back and come back with the select inverse so that we're selecting the features, and try a levels on that just to bring a little bit more, bring out the highlights a little bit in the body, and a little more darkening to the face. Such simple changes. And we go from the open, certainly a good position. And you notice the tilt of the body, as I mentioned before, very critical. Let's crop this a little bit to see what happens if we don't think about the hands. Now, the spacing overall is very important. So I would have the tighter area on the left and a little more space on the right, because I think it might be also interesting to see this flipped. Look at that. That doesn't work. As many times as I would think, it works, but as many times as I would think about that, it doesn't have the same sensitivity to me as her posed this way and her eyes looking out this way. Last thing I would consider doing on this one, maybe, is to just brighten up the mask so that I bring your eye instantly to her face. That's the important part. In a portraiture, the eyes, the face. So from here to here, even more so from here to just having that light background. Almost a light background. Very interesting. I think it could be enhanced even more. Ooh, just lost it. I'm going to need to stop share and share again. Pose. Hands. And you see the back of the hands, a little firm. No, with a young gal, you're not going to be saying, okay, turn your hand to the left a little bit. I need to see the, but keep in mind, as you're shooting, you could do multiple shots. I think the pose is really interesting. And she looks sad. You would want her to smile a bit. Well, let's think about background and the other highlight area. See the highlight area down here? A little bit too bright. Just darken that a little bit. We'll keep the eye coming up into her, and the face being the brightest area. So just darkening that lower left corner. Very nice. I'll select subject. Simple techniques. These are not difficult to do. Simple. Select that. I'll add to the subject so that I can have the background. That's really what I want, is the background. So we'll just do that. Come down. Do this in a piece. Select inverse. Let's lighten it even more, and you'll see how much more this becomes three-dimensional. By brightening that background, how she starts to stand out and still keep a little bit of the detail there. But now she's much more three-dimensional. Let's do a little bit. Oh, and I'm doing the background before working on the subject so that I can see how it should be affected in relation to contrast. Down to this, and we'll add levels on this one. Just darken her just a little bit, not a lot. I don't want to lose any detail, but look at the beauty in her hair now. And come over to the dodge tool to just do a little bit midtones on her face to bring your eye right there, even though she has a white blouse on. So we look at from the beginning. So now much more three-dimensional. You are presenting the person and stands out from the background. That's the key for portraiture, present the person. Would have liked for her to be smiling. That would have been a different aspect of that image. Think about other simple ways. Here's a very sharp, well, somewhat sharp, but it should be very sharp in the face. I could sharpen that a little bit. Let's do that. Very sharp on the face, because I want to show you how they've already started to have a white light vignette. That's an interesting aspect for a portraiture. So we'll go to Camera Raw, and I will use the feature in Camera Raw for vignetting under Effects, Vignetting, and I'll take it to the left, which create to the right, sorry, to the right, which brings a white vignette, and then feather it so that it just fades in a little bit easier. What a dreamy way to present this image and to keep the face relatively sharp. So what a difference. Look how much more you watch the face. What a beautiful portraiture this way versus that background. So bring out that face more. And maybe even dodge a little bit more in some areas here to lighten around so that the face still is the main element. And do a little bit of darkening just to make that three-dimensional. From there to here, what a beautiful image to begin with. Portrait, the expression. Also, on this young lady, would have been neat to say, look up at me. Look at me. So you get multiple shots since you have the person posing against a simple background. Wedding shots. This is extremely flat. The lighting looks good. It looks like there's detail there, but what a flat overall image. And just doing initially, let's just do a levels adjustment and adjust the midtones. And now you see that background darkening, better skin tones. Her face is very sharp, good detail in the eyes. Very good. This highlight, because of the veil on her hair, is a little bit of a bother to me, but that's just a preference, a personal preference. So I would consider just darkening that area just a little bit to bring the hair back a little bit more in there. And maybe that's actually too much. As I'm starting to work on this, I see that. But when you work on something like that, go back to the whole image and see how well it's working. I want your eye to go instantly to her face. So I'll just darken down at the bottom here. Now, to bring out a little more of the three-dimensionality of the flowers themselves without making them too dark overall, one technique is to use the burn tool on shadows. because then it only darkens the darkest pixels. It doesn't darken the midtones or anything else. And just click a little bit here and there. I'm just clicking. I'm not running it down there. I'm just clicking on it to make it a little more three-dimensional. So here's the difference of using that technique from here to here. And it's very subtle, but a little bit more. Much more three-dimensional. And I don't want to take away from her face in any way. So that's very good. And I just open on her face, a little bit of the shadow right on her chin. So here we are from opening this. Again, simple techniques of presentation is so important. And now it's much more three-dimensional, and you instantly look at her and her face and expression, the expression in her eyes. So beautiful. In fact, let's key in on the face, on the eyes, because they are so beautiful. You're creating images for the bride, for her day, her special day. Do multiple shots and work in on it and so on. Now, in this case, it would be interesting, I think, to have it at this level, to try using the white vignette and see how that allows that image. That's because we don't have all the features here, do we? Go back to this. That. Go into Adobe Camera Raw and we'll do the vignette. Just open up that more around her. I think that's a nice way for a wedding image to have the highlights, even though with that little bit of a darker background. I think that works well. Maybe I'll just change this upper part a little bit more because it's a little too heavy. What a difference. Very nice. Now we get a little bit more sophisticated overall. A good friend of mine, Michael Belk, is a master at portraiture. Oh, a very high key presentation overall. The softness. You see the hand? It's not quite the back of the hand. It's the side of the hand, which works much better. This one, although it is the side of the hand, the curve on the wrist works in conjunction for this, but I would have asked her also to, and maybe Michael did, change the position of the hand a little bit. But you see how the arms are coming down, creates that V, which is working also with the aspect of a V of the hair, the eyes, all soft all around, good detail in all areas of the face. Very pretty. Think about that when you're photographing. Simple background, plain background, white background. Sharpness, eyes, going all the way back to the side of the head. Very high key and amusing in many ways with the color of her fingernails. Simple background. Now you're posing probably in a studio. And working this all the way around. And I thought, oh yeah, well, let's look at it this way and see. And I think this works, for me, it works better this way because it leads me right in. Her arm leads me up to her face. And now the color of the blue on her face and her eyes is even more prominent to me than the original. I tend to see the face and then come down her arm. And I'm looking down in this right-hand area. And that seems like a lot of empty space on the right-hand side. So consider spatial relationships. They are so critical in portraiture. In this case, by turning it this way, and she becomes what I call the containment on the right-hand side, this open area here works fine because you keep coming back right up into her face. Very high key. So it doesn't have to be large contrast. Think about the creative aspects of the light and how you want to show the person. Not often would I consider sepia tone for an image, but the expression is so good and the sepia tone or golden tone working in relation to the hair. And where's the brightest area? Right at the face area here, almost blown out. In fact, it is blown out there. This was an image I downloaded from the web. But detail all over, texture, plain background, a little bit of a burn up in the of a vignetting, but you can't stop looking at the face. If we take this to look at it from the standpoint of pure black and white, let's see how that looks. It doesn't have the same feeling to me. I think this toning makes that image, well, there's a lot at making the image, the aspect of the hat, the lips, the shoulders, the shoulder darker area against the light, the lighter area against the dark, lighter area of the hat against the dark area. All those are three-dimensional aspects. And you would think black and white. No, this is much more interesting with the coloring. So don't be afraid to go forward with some coloring aspects from making it a black and white and then toning it. Expressions, major highlight. Where is it? One of the things I learned also in portraiture was look at the eyes, not only to look into them, but it will show you where the light is and what kind of light it is. So this looks like 3 windows or 2 large windows. So he was in front of that window, and that's where the light was coming from. The hand this way is fine, side of the hand. The broad area of the forearm is a little much with this face, so you need to think about that. I'm sure you probably say, oh, that's a great photo. Yes, it is a good photo, but I just want you to think about some of those other aspects. And the hand being the flat hand here, but the expression, and as soon as that comes in, boy, that just clicks. I want to see it, reading it from left to right this way. Reading it left to right this way, you really come into the face. And so there's aspects of the shape of the hand could just be darkened a little bit, and got the side of the face, and the forearm to have the viewer see that face so much. Oh, I was doing them on shadows, burn on shadows. Now I want to burn midtones. So also lighten up some of the detail. So I'm going to dodge on midtones, just on the hair, to bring out a little bit more, so that now that you see this image, you look right into the face. And a little bit more highlight on the shadow, highlight on the face itself, bottom part of the face, rather than the eyes. So just soften that a little bit, and a wonderful aspect technique. I'm doing techniques that are not very complex. Let's just saturate the eye just a little bit here, and this one a little bit. You notice the drop off in depth of field from this eye, which is very sharp, is already dropping off. And that's that aspect of shooting at f5.6 or f4. And most people shooting portraits thinks it needs to be that short of a depth of field. No, I recommend f8, f11. f8 really would have given great detail in the arm all the way back. Focus on the eye, that's your focus point, and then let it fall off from there. So for me, I would have preferred sharpness in the nose and the lips on this image. As good an image it is, I would have preferred those aspects. Emotion. What a neat image, emotion. But why the hair coming down across the face and across the forehead? Now, all you had to do was go up and ask her, or go up and touch it and move it. So very important to think about what's happening on the face. The expression is beautiful. The hands are flat again. You see the big flat area on the hands. You think, John, you're taking apart an image that is so cute. Yes, only in the sense I want it to be better and could be with just a few recommendations to the person you're photographing. How about a reflection? That's very creative. So that you have someone sitting on a table or a glass top table, blurs the background. Depth of field is sharpness with the hands all the way back, a little bit into the hair back here. The ear ring is sharp, the eyes are super sharp. The reflection here and the working of the reflection, creating this form on the left and on the right, and the tilt of the head, so very special. The tilt of the head is often a very important aspect of portraiture. A head straight up. I did show one earlier, that young gal, head straight up, worked really well because of all that was going on. But a tilt of the head is always an interesting thing. So take a couple shots, one with the head straight up, one with the head tilted to the left or tilted to the right. But boy, the eyes sharp, need to have those eyes sharp. But what a creative idea to have the reflection. Very
John,
nice.
on that photo with the reflection, the background with the door is, I find it disturbing.
Background of,
Yeah, the background, there is white and there is a
yes,
door frame.
yes,
There
I
is
see
a
that.
white, there is a white streak next to her hair.
Yes, right here. Good catch. Good catch. So easy to do, easy to adjust. See, I was looking mostly at getting the idea of the reflection, but you caught those aspects right away. So I did a select subject, and Photoshop is making that select subject capability much, much better. I'll do the inverse so that I can darken it. But before I darken it, one of the things is very interesting, an easy way to do to remove something in the background that you don't want is you can clone. And if you clone with a selection, then if I simply grab this area on the left and start cloning that down, because I have the selection, it will not go into her. So I can just easily match what's there without worrying about trying to get it into the dress. And now that I have that as a background also, I can add the levels to it and darken the background some. That would be one way to do it, which will allow her to stand out even more. But that's maybe a little too much sharpness on her. So with that background selected, I'll take that back. With that background selected, not only could I clone and not affect the body, I can use the burn tool and just darken stuff, and I can run it right over where she is, so I can come right up to the head and darken those without worrying about having any burn effect on her. Come down to the bottom here, darken that a little bit, and now I would like to darken the reflection just a little bit because it would be darker than the foreground. What a difference. Good catch. Let's take a look from open to final presentation. Big difference. Now we get a little bit more sophisticated with what I would call more formal, or first playful. Let's go to playful, but also formal. A wedding. What an interesting, creative presentation of a wedding image, of have the bride lay down, looks like she's laying on the grass, and spread the dress out. Now, I don't like all these leaves all over the place. I think some of them would have been fine, but this one over her arm, no, I don't know that I'd want one in her hand. But the idea of presenting this in a certain way, and I would have put her dress up in this area also to balance it. Well, let's crop it a little bit to show you what I mean by the balance. So I think this is so creative. What an interesting way to present a wedding, a bride. Very creative. Before I do this, also go back to when you're thinking of these kinds of images, I've started to really appreciate and like the wider vignettes. Very nice. Look how she stands out now. A portrait, you want the viewer to instantly see the beauty of the person you're photographing. So another wedding portrait here is this one, and you know what I'll do with this, but it works this way also, but not as much, I think, as looking into the face, because now you see the expression even more. Here, you see this, but you tend to see the veil and the beautiful detail in the veil in her hands. Now, she had turned her hand just a little bit more, this hand just a little bit more, so that it would have been somewhat of the side of her hand. This is a little bit too flat for a portraiture. Now the lighting, this is an image I dropped down from the web, so the lighting here is a little too bright because you're losing some detail in the face, but I'll just assume that that wasn't the way it was photographed. But here she is, beautiful, nice vertical, a very nice vertical. And again, let's do the light vignette. With a wedding image, I think these light vignettes work so well because it brings out the essence of the bride so much. Amazing. Let's just do a little levels on her, bring out a little bit more detail of her. Simple techniques, very simple. Here, from here to here, and then from here to that, you've emphasized her by doing those little bit of enhancements. Be creative. What a wonderful presentation of this image. Be creative. This is the image. Using a mirror and focusing on the face in the mirror so that the foreground is out of focus and the background is very black. So that was against the black area. Even now with this image, how beautiful that is to have that face. You can't stop looking at the face in the mirror. The only other thing I would do to this is to darken this bottom area here so that that mirror stands out a little bit more, just darken her face here. So creative. Be creative. A mirror. How simple is that? Well, maybe even crop this in a little bit more here because you emphasize that reflection so much more. Wow, that just jumps. And the sharpness all through here. So this really is a shallow depth of field. You see, even her thumb is not in focus. So focusing on the eyes and maybe in F4, F5, 6, no, F5, 6 would be too much, but F4, very creative portrait, very creative portrait. Now get even more creative. Put some texture, use another layer on top. And see here the side of the hand and the fingers, how much more appealing that is. And where you place the hand could have been under her chin. This way it's tying all the face together with it. Really beautiful. And then a layer on top of that with the flowers and fading those out. Let's crop on this one a little bit to play with it. See how it works in a number of ways. I think the arm and the lighting, oh yes, and the lighting. See the lighting's coming in from the left. and somewhat from behind. So that gives the rim light on her nose, and having that darker background there creates that three-dimensionality. I think the curve down along her shoulder and the face, all of that is working so well. Even so, let's crop in even more and see what happens if we make this a tighter vertical. And even that works beautifully. Now, you see where your highlights are and how your eye instantly goes there. It will lighten up a little bit more on the face so that that is even more so take you right into that image. Be very creative. Start with your portraits to add other layers. Artistic, I call it artistic reality. The real world artistically changed. How about having the person hold something in front of her face and just do her face, and sharpness on the eyes and sharpness of whatever you're holding in front of the face. Think about ways of presenting them. Don't have them always sticking their tongue out. That's not a good thing. Be creative in how you're asking them to pose. Remember the mirror. Well, how about the hands and the just darkening all around the portrait? I think the hand area here is just a little too bright on the bottom part of the hand. Let's darken that just a little bit. And because I'm so concerned about portraits of where the main light is. So if I darken that a little bit and darken the head, then bring out the eyes. That's what you want the world to see, those eyes. So I'll dodge on highlights. So instantly, when you look at this image, you will look at those eyes. Look at it from here, some simple changes to there, and get the sponge tool even and bring the color of those eyes out even more. More three-dimensional. Be creative, from casual to formal in studio to just in your home with a simple background coming in close. Very creative. Have them hold something, do a color image, and then work with it to keep color in some area and black and white in the other area. Now, in this case, you see the hands. You are seeing the back of the hand, but the back of the hand on this one to the bottom right is a little too flat. It works. But you see, if you have the hand tilted just a little bit, that you get more of an architectural aspect to the hand. And the head up and looking right up, and you see the bright area in through here. And this is really a well done image in many ways. And when you have something that creative, even making it even more creative is easy to do, and it works because you have something that's so striking to begin with. A very long or vertical works on this. Now, in this case, you see how much more you see the highlights. So maybe just darken the hands just a little bit so that the face is the brightest area and the comes right out. For me, certainly the original capture is critical, but then the simple techniques that you can use to do something make it very creative. So let's get to the point of, even more so, let's go to this level. That's the final image. This was the shot. And I thought, oh, that's so neat. Now, how would you get a bride? This is a wedding shot. How would you get a bride with that veil coming out like that? Well, what you do is you have one of the attendants grab the veil, you're ready to photograph, and so the attendant runs to the side, flips up the veil, and you're just shooting all the time that this is happening. And then when the attendant is out of the picture, you get the shot, or you take them out, of the veil up like that. So creative. Just be creative. Now, all the background here is not interesting, the foreground. So I did a very simple select subject, and it worked very well, as you see. Select subject, selected everything, then do a Control J. Control J creates the selection on a blank layer. So now I have her. And I thought, well, let me try something where I could put her somewhere. Where can I put her? So I now have her. Okay, I'll find some crazy background, or you can find some nice background. And I put her in there. Now, I would even do more. I didn't have the time to work on this more, but I would consider doing a shadow. The last class was on drop shadows. I would do somewhat of a dark drop shadow, or even in this case, just darkening the lower area just a little bit to where I'm not even sure where the light is coming from here. But how creative is that? Just use some neat thing and give the person the ability of having something unique as an artistic portrait. Let's crop in on this and even working something this way. Very creative. Play with them. On this one, maybe it would, before I crop this, maybe it would be better. I still have her there. If we flip her, the image of her, you see there was someone already in that image, and I just placed her over top of him. So if I take it this way for this, and now crop in on this, because when I cropped in it the other way, the head in the background wasn't working as well in relation to her. So now if I crop it this way, another interesting image. So play with them. But having someone throw the veil up, very creative aspect of the wedding. Last one, want to be creative of a portrait? How much more creative can you do with this? Now, this is not just simple techniques. There's a lot of aspects about this, but the person was wrapped in some things, not always. This was created. So just wanted you to think about really different creative aspects. And on this one, I thought about even doing more creativity related to the vignetting. I'm starting to like a lot the brighter white area vignettings for portraits. They work well, but also dark. But I just think that's really very pretty. And now I want to bring back a little bit of the darkness in the head that I lost. So I'll come back in here and just darken the head so that I have that three-dimensional throughout. And on the foot. Here, which is very creative. Here. Any questions before I leave today?
Hey, John, this is Jim.
Yes.
I was wondering if you would ever use the filter, that kind of new filter that you can adjust the face.
Oh, yes. Yes, good. Yes. In fact, I thought I did one on that. If not, I'll do one. It's called the neural filter. Let's see if I can show this to you quickly here and pick one with the face.
Maybe the one that didn't smile that you wanted to smile.
Yes, good idea. Under filter, neural filter. And this is still under construction by Adobe. So it's every time I come to it, I see different features in here, and it's right now working primarily from the cloud rather than on your computer. So it takes a little longer to load. And when I'm doing some of the changes, it takes a little longer for the changes to take place. So there are a lot of things. So here are all the filters. Up in the left-hand side of this opening, you see all filters, your skin smoothing, artifacts removal. Boy, they will start doing more with this because of what Luminar is doing with some of their artifact removals. Sky transfer, you could change the sky. The difference on this one is that if you have a water reflection, it doesn't put the reflection in. Luminar does. I'm sure Photoshop is going to make that happen also. So let's see what we have with Smart Portrait. I click this on, and it gives me all kinds of sliders. So here I have, you see it, the face is what's selected on this, and I'll just move the happiness bar out to the other side and let it work. Up in the right-hand side, you see it's working on that. And it will change the face to more happiness. And the one I did once before, there was an error running this filter. Oh, let me try it again. One I did it on once before, no, still not doing it. Well, you should try it on yours, is that it actually opened the mouth as a smile and then added teeth in it. And it all matched. I'm trying to get the one that says surprise. It's not doing it. So there's something related to my machine not communicating. I'm on the, I don't know why, but try it. All you do is, let me show you again. Go to, have an image, bring it in, go to filter, neural filter. And when it loads in, pick Smart Portrait. And to get to any of these, you need to turn them on by clicking that little, and you see it says in beta. So it's not totally released yet. Let's see if we can do something with this. Choose an image. Select an image from the computer. Well, let's try this. Let's see this one. Now, I won't do that one. Let me do this, and I would say depth field, but not this image. Create a different one here. I'm sorry to take much time on doing this. The neat thing about the depth field capability is you can blur various aspects of the image. And it's one of the things I've talked about a lot in shooting, out in the field shooting, is I have only the one lens, and somebody will say, well, what do you do? And it's, well, I shoot, if I'm shooting scenics, I shoot at a very small f/22, f/19, so that I get depth of field, sharpness everywhere. You say, well, wouldn't you want to blur the background? Well, because I know how to do it in Photoshop. So when I'm photographing, I want the best pixels I can get. And so I will shoot, especially landscapes, sharpness throughout, and then adjust them. Well, with these kinds of capabilities now, photographing portraiture, you can change things. And so maybe the next class or the next one after that, I'll be sure that I'm somehow properly connected to the cloud so that the software works. Any other questions?
Yeah, John,
John, thank you for
I have
another
a
wonderful
question.
class.
Yes.
You were talking in the beginning about the closer the light is to the subject, the softer.
Yes. Isn't that confusing?
Yeah, it is, because I have this shoot tomorrow with a bride and in the studio, and I'm kind of like,
Well, here's the reason. And I remember when I was first told that, and I was being educated in a studio, because the light, if the light is big, so when you bring it in closer, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger to the subject. It's filling the whole subject
okay.
evenly. So
Okay.
it's softer light. Now you expose for that light. It might be so bright on her face, but if you expose correctly for that, you don't get blowouts in any part of the face. When you bring the light away, it becomes more of a spotlight. And so it's a harder light. And
Sure. Okay.
it's
Makes
opposite
total
of how we
sense.
think.
Yeah. Makes sense, but
Yeah.
kind of like,
So a big light is soft light.
okay.
Smaller light is a spotlight and it's much harder, but you also do the correct exposure.
Yeah. I have one more quick question since I'm doing this.
Now, you only get
shoot.
one, Jen.
Please, please. Okay, so this bride tomorrow, she wants lace background, so I'm doing kind of a swish with
Yes.
lace. And she also has a very lacy dress,
Oh,
and she's blonde, and so everything is going to be light.
yes.
Any suggestions?
Well, soft light, of course. And if
Okay,
you are you shooting inside only or outside also?
depends on the day, but I mean, if I shoot her outside, it's just going to be out in our backyard, which is natural. But it's primarily a studio shot, is what she's
Okay.
after. And
Okay.
I do have a large light box, but I also have a window right there that I have covered in black, but I can use.
Yes. Yes. Well, let me share my screen again and show you this one image that I showed today that I think is just a great pose. So think about this one. Hold on. You see my Photoshop screen?
Yes.
Okay. I think that is such a very sensitive, wonderful composition. Simple, and you see she has a white, well, they all have white dresses, but a white lace, more lacy dress, and
Right.
I want to flip.
So how far, you said about 6 feet from the background is what you recommend?
Recommend that if you're going to put a light on the background, you place them then 6 feet away, the background won't get the light from what you're putting on the model.
Right.
So you have this big light and you're coming close to the model. If the background is close, it's lighting the background too.
Right.
If you want to have the background just darker, then just move the model away from the background.
Yeah.
And if you are putting a light also in the background, it should be a stop to 2 stops less, probably a stop less than the main light, so that it's not bright but it's not dark. It just gives you enough. Take a couple shots and you can see how to adjust. But 6 feet is a good way to have the background.
Okay.
This pose, I think, is neat. I would just like her hand turned more towards me, so the thumb was turned away. That way I'd get the side of her hand more. But the expression, and then I also, on this one, since if I had been photographing this one, I would have asked her to, I would have moved the veil a little bit more to the right so that it wasn't over her chin as much. And her at one point, look up for one shot, and then turn your head a little bit more towards me and look at me. And are you happy today? And so I would ask her, are you happy today? Are really happy? And something that's funny to her. So she then gives me a different kind of look. Just keep shooting because you're going to have it in the studio. Just keep shooting different ways to show her.